Once upon a time, there lived a beautiful girl named Amara Okeke. Amara was 19 years old, but life had already taught her more pain than many people twice her age. She had lived in her father's family house since she was a little girl. After her parents died in a road accident, she was taken in by her father's younger brother, Uncle Chika Okeke. People outside said he rescued her. They said he showed kindness by bringing his late brother's child into his home. But the truth was different. Uncle Chika allowed his wife, Auntie Ugochi, to turn Amara into a housemaid. Amara did not eat at the table with the family. She served food, washed plates, swept the compound, fetched water, washed clothes, and kept quiet. In that house, silence had become her protection. She had learned that the less she spoke, the less trouble she would attract. Auntie Ugochi never let her forget her place. Almost every day she reminded Amara that she was lucky not to be sleeping outside. She would say, "Without us, you would have been on the street by now." And Amara, with all the pain in her heart, would lower her head and say nothing. In the same house lived Chioma Okeke, Auntie Ugochi's daughter. Chioma was also a young woman, but her life was nothing like Amara's. She was pampered, dressed well, praised loudly, and treated like a queen. If Chioma coughed, her mother would panic. If Amara cried, nobody asked why. That was how they lived under the same roof. One girl was loved loudly. The other was endured quietly. That morning, as the sun began to rise, Amara was already in the backyard, bending over a basin of clothes. Her hands were moving quickly through soapy water. She had already swept the compound and cleaned the kitchen before anyone else in the house fully began their day. At 19, she should have been thinking about her future, about love, about friends, about the kind of woman she wanted to become. But Amara's life was different. Most mornings, she thought only about work, insults, and how to survive the day without making Auntie Ugochi angry. Then from inside the house, the voice came. "Amara!" Amara quickly lifted her head. "Yes, Auntie?" Auntie Ugochi stepped into the backyard, one hand on her waist, her face already hard with irritation. "Why are you still on those clothes? Have you finished washing your uncle's things?" "Not yet, Auntie," Amara replied softly. Auntie Ugochi hissed. "Since morning? Just ordinary washing? What exactly do you do with your time in this house?" Amara lowered her eyes. "I am sorry, Auntie." "Sorry does not do work," Auntie Ugochi snapped. "If we were not the ones feeding you, by now you would have been begging outside." Amara said nothing. She simply bent again and continued washing. That was her life. If she worked hard, nobody praised her. If she slowed down, they insulted her. If she tried to explain herself, it was called disrespect. So she had stopped explaining. She had stopped defending herself. She had even stopped expecting kindness. Inside the house, Chioma sat comfortably in front of a mirror, rubbing cream on her arms and checking her reflection. She was getting ready for the day with the slow peace of someone who had never been asked to carry the weight of a whole house on her back. "Chioma," Auntie Ugochi called, and her voice changed at once, becoming softer, sweeter. "Come and eat before your tea gets cold." "Yes, Mommy," Chioma answered brightly. Amara heard them from the backyard and kept scrubbing the cloth in her hands. She had prepared that breakfast, but she would not sit at the table to eat it. Far away from that suffering, in a very different kind of house, a young man named Obinna Eze was seated across from his father, Chief Emeka Eze. Obinna was handsome, intelligent, and already successful at a young age. He had built a good name for himself in business and had made more money than many men much older than him. But on that day, he was not talking to his father about parties or pleasure. He was talking about work and purpose. "I want to start something meaningful there," Obinna said. "Not just business for profit. I want something that will help people too." Chief Emeka looked at his son with quiet pride. He was a wealthy man, respected by many, but what pleased him most in that moment was not his son's success. It was the fact that Obinna wanted to build something useful. His father nodded. "That is good. When you get there, ask for Chika Okeke. He knows people well. He will help you understand things better." Obinna nodded. "All right, Dad." He left that discussion with only one thing in mind: work. Love was nowhere in his thoughts. He was not going there to find a wife. He was not looking for any woman. But life has a way of changing direction when a person least expects it. By afternoon, Obina was already on the road. The journey was not too long, but as he drove, his mind stayed on the same things his father had told him. He was thinking about land, people, and how to begin the project well. He wanted to see things with his own eyes before making any decision. He did not want to sit in an office and plan a future for people he had not even met. When he finally arrived, he slowed his car in front of a modest family compound. It was simple and open, the kind of place that carried both life and struggle in its appearance. The fence was low. The yard was plain. There were a few plastic chairs outside. A line of washed clothes moved gently in the breeze. It was not a rich home, but it was not empty of pride either. Obina stepped out of the car and looked around. Before long, a man in a cap came out to welcome him. It was Uncle Chico Keke. "Ah, you must be Obina," he said at once, smiling with sudden warmth. "My son, you are welcome. You are very welcome." Obina greeted him politely. "Good afternoon, sir." Good afternoon, Uncle Cheek replied, already sounding eager. "Please come in, sit down, you are highly welcome." He quickly dusted one of the chairs with his hand, though it did not need dusting, and invited Obina to sit. There was something in the man's manner that was trying too hard. It was the kind of welcome people gave when they already knew the person before them was important. Obina sat down and exchanged a few polite words with him. Inside the house, Auntie Ugochi had already seen the car through the window. The moment she laid eyes on Obina, her expression changed. This was not an ordinary visitor. Even before anyone told her, she could see it clearly. His clothes were simple but expensive. His wristwatch alone could pay some people's rent for years. His car was clean and polished. Even the way he sat carried quiet confidence. This was a young man with money, class, and opportunity written all over him. Her eyes sharpened immediately. She turned quickly and called, "Chioma!" Chioma came out from her room. "Yes, Mummy?" Auntie Ugochi lowered her voice, but her urgency was clear. "A rich young man is outside with your father. Go and bring him water." Chioma moved toward the tray at once, but her mother stopped her. "Not like that," Auntie Ugochi said, looking her up and down. "Go and change first." Chioma understood immediately. She hurried back into her room. A few minutes later, she came out wearing a more fitted dress, something chosen to draw attention. It sat close to her body and left little to the imagination. Her hair was touched up quickly. Her lips were shining. She carried the tray with a small, proud smile, already sure of herself. Auntie Ugochi nodded in satisfaction. "Yes," she said quietly. "Go." At the same time, from the back of the house, Auntie Ugochi called out sharply, "Amara." Amara, who had been in the kitchen rinsing out a pot, rushed out. "Yes, Auntie." "Take the basin and go fetch water from the well." Amara nodded at once. "Yes, Auntie." She did not know there was a reason for the timing. She only carried the empty basin and stepped into the compound in her simple faded clothes, plain and quiet as always. Outside, Chioma had just reached Obina. She smiled sweetly and bent slightly as she offered him the glass. "Please, have some water." Obina looked up out of politeness and took the glass. "Thank you." But his eyes had barely settled on her. At that exact moment, Amara crossed the compound with the basin in her hand, her head lowered, moving with the quiet habit of someone who had learned not to take up space. Obina looked up again and froze. Something inside him stopped. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the ground. The sound broke across the compound. Everyone turned at once. Uncle Chaik sat up. "My son, are you all right?" But Obina did not answer immediately. His eyes were on Amara. She had stopped walking when she heard the glass break. She lifted her face a little, confused, but only for a moment. Then she lowered it again. She was used to being the reason for blame, even when she did not know what she had done. Chioma stood there with the tray in her hand, her smile gone. She had dressed to be noticed. She had come out expecting to make an impression, but this stranger had barely looked at her. His attention had gone to the quiet girl with the basin. For the first time in a long time, somebody was seeing Amara not as a servant, not as a burden, not as one more shadow passing through the compound, but as a young, beautiful woman. And Auntie Ugochi saw it too. She hated it instantly. Obina finally bent and placed the unbroken part of the glass on the tray. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "It slipped." "It's nothing. It's nothing," Uncle Cheek said quickly, though his own eyes had already followed the direction of Obina's stare. Amara moved again and continued walking out of the compound. But something had already changed in the air. Kiyoma felt it. Auntie Ugochi felt it. Even Uncle Cheek felt it. The whole compound seemed to know that something unwanted had entered the day. After a few moments, Obina sat back down. He tried to return to the discussion about his visit, but his mind was no longer fully there. He had come for work. He had come with plans in his head. Yet now a quiet face he had seen for only seconds was already pushing against all his thoughts. He looked once toward the gate where Amara had disappeared, then turned back to Uncle Cheek. "Who is that girl?" he asked calmly. The question landed heavily. Uncle Cheek paused. Inside the doorway, Auntie Ugochi stiffened. Kiyoma's face hardened. Then Uncle Cheek forced a short laugh, as if the question did not matter. "Ah, that one." Obina waited. Uncle Cheek shifted in his seat. "She is just one girl we have been managing here." He spoke carelessly, like a man discussing an old broken chair. "I picked her up out of pity long ago," he continued. "Since she came into this house, nothing has moved well. Some people even say she carries bad luck. Everybody avoids her. We are the only ones helping her." Obina said nothing. He listened, but something inside him rejected the words at once. There was a kind of cruelty that always announced itself too quickly, and he heard now. He did not know the full truth yet, but he knew one thing already. No man spoke like that about a human being unless something was wrong. He did not argue. He only nodded once, but his silence had changed. A little later, footsteps sounded again near the entrance. Amara was back. This time the basin was full and balanced carefully on her head. She walked slowly, steady and tired, still trying to pass through the compound unnoticed. Obina rose to his feet before he fully thought about it. Uncle Cheek looked surprised. "My son." But Obina had already started walking. He went straight to Amara. She stopped in front of him, startled. Without saying anything dramatic, Obina lifted both hands and gently helped her lower the basin from her head. Their eyes met. For one brief moment, the whole compound went quiet. There was no smile, no greeting, no flirtation, only silence. But it was not an empty silence. It was the kind that felt as if one wounded soul had suddenly been recognized by another living person. Amara did not know what to do with that look. No man had ever looked at her that way before, not with disrespect, not with pity, not with mockery, just with full attention, as if she mattered. She lowered her eyes first. "Thank you," she said softly. Obina stepped back slightly, but his gaze remained gentle. "You're welcome." That was all. But to Auntie Ugochi, it was too much. She had watched the whole thing from the doorway, with anger rising hot inside her chest. Who did this girl think she was? How dare this happen in her own house, in front of Kiyoma? She wanted to shout immediately, but she held herself because the guest was still there. Not long after, Obina stood to leave. He exchanged parting words with Uncle Cheek, but even as he spoke, his mind was disturbed. He got into his car and drove off, but the image followed him. The quiet girl, the basin, the eyes that looked as if life had been hard on them for too long. Back in the compound, the moment the sound of his car faded, Auntie Ugochi turned sharply. "Amara!" Amara stopped where she was. Before she could speak, the slap landed hard across her face. The sound was sharp. Amara staggered and nearly lost her balance. Kiyoma stood nearby, watching with cold satisfaction. Auntie Ugochi pointed a shaking finger at Amara. "So this is what you have been doing? Standing in front of men and throwing yourself at them?" Amara quickly held her cheek, tears rushing into her eyes. "Auntie, I did nothing." "Shut up," Auntie Ugochi snapped. "You did nothing, yet he could not remove his eyes from you." Amara shook her head helplessly. "I only went to fetch water." "Oh, so now you want to argue with me?" Auntie Ugochi fired back. You shameless girl, in my own house? In front of my daughter? Kiyoma folded her arms. Mummy, leave her. She has been pretending to be innocent all this time. Amara turned to look at her, hurt flashing across her face, but she still said nothing. Uncle Cheek was there. He saw it. He heard it. And like always, he did not stop it. Auntie Ugochi stepped closer again, her words now colder than the slap. Listen to me carefully. Whatever you think you saw today, remove it from your head. Men like that do not look at girls like you. Do you hear me? They marry girls like my daughter, not useless girls who were fed out of pity. Amara's tears slipped down quietly. She lowered her head. Yes, Auntie, she whispered. Get out of my sight, Auntie Ugochi said. Amara picked up the basin with shaking hands and walked away, crying quietly as she went. That evening, far from the compound, Obina kept driving. But though he had left the house behind, he had not left Amara behind. Her face stayed with him. And for the first time since he started that journey, work was no longer the only thing on his mind. By the time Obina reached the city, one thing had become clear in his mind. He wanted to see Amara again. He did not yet know what exactly he was going to do with that feeling. He only knew it was real. It was stronger than passing interest, stronger than ordinary curiosity. Something about her had entered his heart too deeply for him to ignore it. He drove through the gate of his mansion, but he was not himself anymore. The guards greeted him as usual. Welcome, sir. Obina barely answered. Inside the house, his staff noticed it immediately. The housemaid greeted him. The cook greeted him too, but he walked past them like a man whose body had arrived home while his mind was still somewhere else. He sat down in the living room and loosened his wristwatch, but even that simple action felt restless. A few minutes later, food was set before him. He looked at it, lifted the spoon once, then dropped it back. He could not eat. All he could see was Amara's face. Not just her beauty. It was the quietness in her eyes. The pain. The way she carried herself like someone who had learned to make herself small so that life would not hit her too hard. He'd seen beautiful women before, many of them. Women who dressed well, spoke boldly, laughed loudly, and knew they were beautiful. But Amara was different. She was quiet, yet impossible to forget. Obina leaned back and closed his eyes. He had everything money could buy. He lived in comfort. He was respected. He could travel anywhere he wanted. Yet one poor girl in a simple compound had entered his heart so suddenly that he could not even sit in peace inside his own house. He opened his eyes, reached for his phone, and called the one person he normally spoke to when something refused to leave his mind. Justin, he said as soon as the call connected. I need to see you. His friend laughed lightly on the other end. You sound serious. What happened? Can you come out now? Justin paused, then said, All right, send the place. Not long after, the two men were seated across from each other in a quiet restaurant. Justin was Obina's closest friend. He was the kind of man who enjoyed good food, jokes, and easy living. He knew Obina well enough to tell when something was truly bothering him. He looked at Obina's face and frowned slightly. What is it? You look like somebody collected peace on the road. Obina gave a short, tired smile, then shook his head. I met someone, he said. Justin blinked, then leaned back. That is all? I thought this was a serious problem. It is serious. Justin laughed. Who is she? Obina did not answer immediately. He stared at the table for 1 second, then said quietly, A girl from the village. Justin burst into laughter. A village girl, he said. Obina, please. Don't tell me you drove all the way there for work and came back with village love in your head. Obina did not laugh. Justin noticed and slowly sat properly again. You are serious. I am. Justin shook his head in disbelief. What is so special about her? Obina looked up. For the first time since he arrived, there was something firm in his voice. I don't know how to explain it, he said. She is not just beautiful. There is something about her, the way she looks at the ground, the way she keeps quiet, the pain in her face. I have never seen anyone like her. Justin opened his mouth to joke again, but Obina continued before he could. When I saw her, everything else disappeared. The girl they brought to serve me water was dressed to be noticed. I barely saw her. But Amara... He stopped for a moment, then shook his head. I cannot explain it. Justin raised his brows. Amara? That's not even all, Obina said. The way they treated her in that house was wrong, very wrong. And since I came back, I have not had peace. Justin folded his arms. So what now? You want to rescue her? Or marry her after seeing her one time? Obina's eyes hardened a little. Do not mock me. Justin lifted both hands. I'm not mocking you. I'm trying to understand. Obina, you went there for work, not for this. You don't even know the girl. I want to know her, Obina said at once. Justin stared at him. Obina leaned forward. I am willing to go back there and stay for as long as it takes just to know her. Justin gave a dry laugh. You have truly lost your senses. Obina said nothing. Justin studied him more carefully now. You mean this? Yes. For a moment the laughter left Justin's face. He could see that this was not one of Obina's passing moods. He was troubled in a real way. Still, Justin did not understand it. All this for a girl you just saw in one compound? He asked quietly. Obina looked away. Yes. Justin shook his head. My friend, be careful. Sometimes what looks deep is only shock. Give yourself time. But Obina was already shaking his head. No. This did not feel like confusion anymore. It felt like certainty. He stood up not long after and picked up his keys. Justin looked up. You're leaving already? Yes. Are you angry? Obina gave a short breath. I came to speak to someone who knows me, but you think this is a joke. Justin said nothing. Obina looked at him one more time. It is not a joke. He turned and walked out, more certain than ever that what he felt was real. While Obina was being consumed by thoughts of her, life in Uncle Cheek's compound was getting worse for Amara. Auntie Ugochi had not calmed down after Obina's visit. If anything, her anger had only grown. She had become obsessed with punishing Amara for one simple thing: being noticed. The next day, after Amara had swept the compound until it was clean, Auntie Ugochi came outside, looked around, bent down, picked up a handful of dry leaves from one corner, and scattered them across the ground. Then she called out loudly, Amara! Amara rushed from the kitchen. Yes, Auntie? What is this? Auntie Ugochi demanded, pointing at the floor. Is this your idea of sweeping? Amara looked around in confusion. But Auntie, I just... The woman's voice rose at once. You just what? Amara lowered her face. I'm sorry, Auntie. Then sweep it again. Amara picked up the broom and started over. Later that same afternoon, after she had cleaned the parlor, Auntie Ugochi entered with dirty feet, rubbed her slippers on the floor, and then shouted for Amara again. Come and look at this place. Is this how a clean parlor should look? Amara stood there, tired and speechless. Start again, Auntie Ugochi said. There was no end to it. If Amara washed clothes, more clothes would appear. If she finished in the kitchen, she would be sent outside. If she sat down for one moment, someone would call her lazy. And the insults had become even sharper now. One afternoon, as Amara bent to spread washed clothes on the line, Auntie Ugochi stood behind her and said coldly, You think because one rich man looked at you once, you have become something? Amara's hands paused. I did not do anything, she said quietly. Auntie Ugochi laughed harshly. That is exactly your problem. Girls like you do not need to do much. You only stand there and look innocent. But let me tell you now, no rich man will ever marry a girl like you. Never. Inside the house, Chioma heard those words and said nothing. She liked hearing them. They made her feel safe. Then one night after dinner, when the compound had already grown dark, Auntie Ugochi called Amara again. Take the basin and go and fetch fresh water. Amara looked up in shock. Now? Yes, now. Auntie, the well is already closed. I did not ask you for story. I said go and fetch water. Amara swallowed. People do not go there this late. Auntie Ugochi stepped closer. So now you want to teach me what people do? Go. Amara took the basin and left. Outside, the road was dim and quiet. By the time she reached the well, it was exactly as she feared. It was already shut. There was nothing she could do. She stood there for a moment in the darkness, hugging the empty basin to herself, then turned back slowly. When she reached the house, she knocked gently. "Auntie." No answer. She knocked again. "Auntie Ugochi." The voice came from inside, hard and cold. "Did you bring the water?" "No, Auntie. The well was already—" "Then go back there." "Auntie, it is closed." There was silence for 1 second. Then the answer came. "If you do not bring water, you will not enter this house." Amara's eyes filled at once. "Auntie, please." But the door remained shut. She stood there for some time, knocking softly, begging, pleading. Nobody opened. In the end, she turned the empty basin upside down, sat on it beside the door, and cried quietly into the night. The air was cold. Her body ached. But what hurt most was not the cold. It was the knowing that inside that house were people who could hear her crying and still sleep. By morning, no one asked if she had slept. No one asked if she was cold. No one even looked surprised to see her there. Auntie Ugochi simply opened the door and said, "If you are done sitting, come and wash these clothes." Amara stood up slowly. Her body was weak. Her eyes were swollen. She had not eaten, but she carried the basin to the backyard and began washing. She was bent over the clothes when Uncle Cheek's own pile was dropped beside her. Then a few minutes later, Kiyoma came and added more. "Wash these ones too," she said carelessly. Amara looked at the heap and then at the sky. Her hands were shaking. For the first time, tears fell into the soapy water as she whispered, "Papa, Mama, why did you leave me in this family?" Her voice broke. "Why did you leave me alone like this?" She lifted her face fully to the sky now, tears running freely. "If you can hear me, please come and carry me too. I am tired. I am tired." Then she lowered her head and kept washing. A few days later, Obina returned. This time he did not come only for a short visit. He came to stay for a while in his father's old big house nearby. The house was spacious, comfortable and quiet, but comfort was not why he had come. He wanted to see Amara again. The next morning, just after sunrise, he went toward the river. And there she was. Amara was bending near the water, filling her basin carefully. She looked up when she heard footsteps. The moment she saw him, she froze. Obina slowed his steps at once so as not to scare her. "I did not mean to frighten you," he said gently. Amara's first reaction was not joy. It was fear. She looked around before speaking, as if someone might be hiding behind a tree to report her. "You should not be talking to me," she said quietly. Obina stopped. "Why?" Amara tightened her fingers around the basin. "Because since you noticed me, my life has become harder." Those words hit him deeply. He looked at her in silence. He had suspected it, but hearing it from her own mouth made it worse. "I'm sorry," he said after a moment. Amara shook her head. "It is not your fault, but please, do not bring me more trouble." Obina's voice stayed soft. "What is your name?" She hesitated, then answered, "Amara." He repeated it slowly, as if making sure he would not forget it. "Amara." She lifted the basin slightly. "I should go." He wanted to say more. He wanted to ask 100 questions. But he could see that fear had already filled her whole body. So he only nodded. Amara began to walk away, then turned once and said quietly, "Please do not follow me." Then she left. But something had already changed. There was now a path between them. From that day onward, they began seeing each other at the river. At first, the conversations were short and careful. He would greet her. She would answer. He would ask how she was. She would say, "I'm fine," even when she was not. But little by little, the silence between them began to soften. Obina learned not to press her too hard. He spoke gently. He gave her space. He returned again the next day and the next. Soon, Amara began to say a little more. She told him small things first. How early she woke up, How she liked the quiet of morning before everyone began shouting for her. How she often came to the river with too much on her mind and left with the same burden waiting for her at home. Obinna listened. Then he told her small things too. About business, about travel, about how noisy city life could be, about how a person could be surrounded by comfort and still feel restless. Amara would look at him strangely when he said things like that, as if she could not fully imagine a man like him carrying restlessness. Sometimes she smiled a little. Sometimes she even laughed. And every time she laughed, Obinna felt something open inside him. For Amara, the river slowly changed. It had always been a place of work, a place to carry water from and return quickly. But now, for the first time in years, it was becoming something else. A place where no one insulted her. A place where someone looked at her and saw her. A place where she could breathe. From that day, the river became their quiet meeting place. Amara still came there to fetch water, but now there was always a part of her that looked up before she reached the bank, just to see if Obinna was already there. Sometimes he would be waiting. Sometimes he would arrive a few minutes after her. And each time their eyes met, something small and warm would rise in her chest, before fear quickly followed it. One morning, they were standing under the shade of a tree near the river, talking in low voices. Obinna had said something about how he almost missed an important meeting because he was thinking of her, and for the first time Amara laughed freely. It was not a small smile. It was a real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep and surprised even her. Obinna stared at her for a moment. "What?" she asked, suddenly shy. He shook his head slowly. "Nothing. I was just thinking that your face changes when you laugh." Amara looked down at once. "Is that a bad thing?" "No," he said softly. "It is a beautiful thing." Before she could answer, another woman passed not too far from them with a bundle of firewood on her head. Her name was Nkem. She was one of those women who never carried news without adding pepper to it. She slowed her steps a little when she saw them, but she did not greet them. She only looked once, then twice, and kept walking. By the time Nkem reached the compound, the small thing she had seen at the river had already turned into a full story in her mouth. She rushed in, breathing hard, and called out, "Auntie Ugochi! Auntie Ugochi!" Auntie Ugochi came out at once. "Why are you shouting my name like that?" Nkem lowered her voice, but her face was full of excitement. "That you're Amara." Auntie Ugochi's eyes narrowed immediately. "What about her?" "I just saw her at the river with that rich young man." Auntie Ugochi folded her arms. "Doing what?" Nkem clicked her tongue. "Talking like people who have forgotten themselves. Standing close, smiling, laughing. If you had seen the way they were looking at each other." That was all Auntie Ugochi needed. By the time the story passed through her heart, it had become something much worse. To her, Amara was no longer just talking to Obinna. She was now shamelessly chasing him. She was trying to rise above her place. She was trying to steal what should belong to Kioma. By the time Amara returned to the house with her basin of water, Auntie Ugochi was already waiting in the middle of the compound. Her face was dark with anger. Amara slowed down the moment she saw her. "Auntie?" Before she could say anything else, Auntie Ugochi grabbed the basin from her head and poured the whole water over her. Amara gasped. The water ran down her clothes, her face, her hair, and dropped to the ground around her feet. Kioma, who had been standing near the doorway, watched with hard eyes. Auntie Ugochi pointed at Amara in fury. "So this is what you have turned into? A shameless girl who runs after men at the river?" Amara wiped water from her face, shocked and trembling. "Auntie, I did not run after anybody." "Shut your mouth," Auntie Ugochi shouted. "You think I do not hear things in this village?" Amara shook her head quickly. "We were only talking." That was enough. "Only talking," Auntie Ugochi repeated with bitter laughter. "You, this girl, you have started speaking to rich men now, in my house, under my nose." Then the insults came. They came one after another, sharp and ugly. She called Amara useless. She called her cheap. She called her a shameless orphan trying to force herself into places she did not belong. Amara stood there, soaked, humiliated, and shaking. Then Auntie Ugochi bent down, picked up 2 canes lying near the wall, and raised one of them. "Today," she said, "I will teach you a lesson you will never forget." Amara stepped back at once. "Auntie, please." But before the cane could come down, a firm voice cut through the air. "That is enough." Everyone turned. Obina was standing just inside the compound. He had followed from a distance after leaving the river because something in Amara's face had told him she was afraid of going home. He had not planned to step in unless he had to. Now he had to. He walked forward, calm but furious, and stopped between Auntie Ugochi and Amara. Auntie Ugochi was stunned. "My son!" "I said enough," Obina repeated. His voice was not loud, but it was hard enough to stop the whole compound. Auntie Ugochi forced a laugh. "This is a family matter." Obina looked straight at her. "Family matter?" His eyes moved once toward Amara, still dripping with water behind him, then back to her. "The first day I came here, you people said she was not really family. You spoke about her like someone you picked up out of pity, so do not stand here and use family matter to cover wickedness." Silence fell heavily. Uncle Cheek, who had just stepped into the compound, froze where he was. Auntie Ugochi tightened her grip on the cane. "You do not understand." "No," Obina said. "I understand enough." He pointed lightly toward Amara, without taking his eyes off Auntie Ugochi. "I have seen how you speak to her. I have seen how you treat her. And now I am seeing this." He looked at the cane in her hand. "If any of you touch her again like this, I will go to the police myself." That changed everything. Even Auntie Ugochi knew there were some threats that should not be tested. Kiyoma's face tightened with anger. Uncle Chai cleared his throat weakly. "My son, please calm down." Obina turned to him. "Sir, with respect, I am calm. That is why I am speaking." Then he faced Auntie Ugochi again. Dropped the cane. Her hand moved slowly. Then she let it fall. For the first time in her life, Amara stood behind someone who was stronger than the people hurting her. For the first time, somebody powerful had looked at her suffering and said no. She did not fully understand what changed inside her in that moment. She only knew that something did. Obina turned slightly and looked at her. "Go inside and change," he said gently. Amara could barely speak. "Yes," she whispered. She walked away with her wet clothes clinging to her body, her heart beating in a way she had never felt before. That night she lay awake for a long time. Not because of Auntie Ugochi, not because of the insults, but because for the first time when pain came for her, it did not meet silence. It met a voice. And that voice had belonged to Obina. After that day, the bond between them deepened quickly. They were still careful, still quiet, still hidden, but something had changed. Amara no longer looked at him like a distant rich man who had noticed her once. She now looked at him as someone who had stood for her when it mattered. A few days later, Obina saw her in the market. She was standing near a small wooden tray filled with oranges, calling softly to passing buyers. "Fresh oranges. Sweet oranges." Her voice was not loud enough to compete with the market noise, but she kept trying. Obina stopped in front of her. Amara looked up and her eyes widened slightly. "You?" He smiled. "Yes, me." She glanced around quickly. "You should not stand here too long." "Why?" "You know why." He looked at the tray. "How much is everything?" Amara frowned slightly. "Everything?" "Yes. I'll take all of it." She shook her head at once. "No." Obina blinked. "No? I know what you are doing," she said quietly. "You want to help me, but I do not want pity." He watched her for a moment. There was no pride in her voice, no rudeness, only dignity. Even in poverty, she still wanted to stand on her own feet. That touched him more deeply than he expected. So he smiled and nodded. "All right. Then sell to me the way you would sell to any other person." Amara hesitated, then picked out a few good oranges and told him the price. He paid without arguing. As she handed them to him, he said softly, "You always fight for your dignity, don't you?" Amara looked down. "If I lose that too, then what do I have left?" Obina said nothing for a moment. Then he took the oranges and walked away with even more respect for her than before. Their meetings at the river continued. The talks became easier. The smiles lasted longer. Obina no longer spoke to her like a man doing charity. He spoke like a man who had found someone he truly wanted to understand. And Amara, little by little, began to relax in his presence. One evening, the sky was turning soft and gold over the river, when Obina looked at her for a long time and said, "Amara, I need to tell you something." She turned to him slowly. He took one breath. "I love you." Amara's fingers tightened around the edge of her basin. She said nothing. Obina stepped a little closer. "I am not here to play with you," he said. "I did not come looking for this, but now that it is here, I cannot pretend. I love you. I want something real." Amara's eyes filled at once, not because she was happy first, but because she was afraid. Life had not trained her to trust joy. It had trained her to fear it. She looked away and said softly, "Do you know what you are saying?" "Yes. I am not Kioma. I am not the kind of girl men choose in front of everybody. I know exactly who you are," he said, "and I am choosing you." Amara swallowed hard. Her voice shook. "It is easy for you to say that now, but if I believe you and this goes wrong..." She stopped and lowered her head. "I do not know if my heart can survive it." Obina's face softened. "I understand," he said. "That is why I am telling you the truth. Not sweet words, not lies. The truth." Amara looked into his eyes for a long moment. There was something steady there, something she had never seen in the eyes of people who spoke to her with pity or cruelty. And slowly, against the fear that had guarded her heart for years, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. Obina's face lit up with a quiet joy that almost looked boyish. He reached for her hand carefully, as if giving her one last chance to pull away. She did not. From that day, they were no longer just two people who met at the river by chance. They were two people building a future in secret. Not long after, Obina told her one evening, "I want to do things the right way. I want to meet your real family." Amara's expression changed at once. The light that had been growing in her eyes dimmed. Obina noticed immediately. "What is it?" She looked down at the water before speaking. "My parents died in an accident when I was 6. Obina's face softened. "Amara, I was the only one that survived." She paused, then added quietly, "Uncle Cheek is not just someone who helped me. He is my father's younger brother." Obina stared at her. "What?" She nodded slowly. "He is my real uncle." For a moment, Obina did not speak. He remembered clearly the first day he came to that compound. He remembered asking, "Who is that girl?" And he remembered exactly what Uncle Cheek had said. That they picked her up out of pity. That she was a burden. That she brought bad luck. His chest tightened with anger. Everything sounded uglier now. It meant they had hidden her identity on purpose. It meant they had taken the grief of a child who lost both parents and turned it into a life of shame. It meant Amara had not only been abused by strangers, she had been abused by her own blood. Obina looked at her again, and what he felt grew deeper than love. This was no longer only about wanting her. It was now about correcting something terribly wrong. The next day he went straight to Uncle Cheek's house. Uncle Cheek welcomed him again, but there was tension in the air this time. Auntie Ugochi came out too. Kioma stood not far away. Obina did not waste time. "I came to say something clearly," he said. "I want to marry Amara." The room went cold. For a second nobody spoke. Then Uncle Cheek forced a weak smile. "My son, there are many girls in this world." "I know. So why put your eyes on that one?" Uncle Cheek asked. "That girl, since she entered this house, things have not moved well. She brings bad luck." Auntie Ugochi quickly added, "If it is a wife you want, Kioma is here. She is well brought up. She can run a home, she knows how to present herself. But Amara, she gave a small, careless shrug. She is not suitable. Inside her small room, Amara heard every word. Her eyes filled with tears. Even now, when happiness had finally knocked on her door, the people who should have protected it were trying to chase it away. But Obina remained firm. He looked first at Uncle Cheek, then at Auntie Ugochi. "Amara is my choice," he said, "and I do not care what you think about her." Silence. Then he added more coldly now, "What I do care about is this. Why did you lie to me the first day I came here? Why did you pretend not to know who she really is?" Uncle Cheek shifted uneasily. Auntie Ugochi's face changed. Obina did not stop. "She is your brother's daughter," he said, "not some stranger you picked up from the road." No one answered. For the first time, their hypocrisy stood naked in front of someone who would not ignore it. Obina rose to leave. At the doorway, his eyes met Amara's for one brief second. Tears were on her face, but there was also something else there. Hope. When Obina got home and told his parents he wanted to marry Amara, the reaction was not simple. His mother, Mrs. Ifeoma Eze, was the first to speak. "What did you say?" Obina stood calmly in the sitting room. "I said I want to marry her." His mother stared at him in disbelief. "A poor village girl? An orphan? Obina, do you know what you're saying?" Chief Emeka Eze, his father, said nothing at first. He only watched. Mrs. Ifeoma rose from her seat. "What about the daughter of Chief Okafor? What about the families we have known for years? Is this how you want to throw away sense and follow emotion?" Obina's jaw tightened. "This is not about throwing away sense. I love her." His mother gave a short, bitter laugh. "Love? Since when did love become enough for marriage in a family like this?" Chief Emeka finally spoke, his voice low. "Let him finish." Mrs. Ifeoma sat back down reluctantly. Obina then explained everything. The first meeting, the way Amara was treated, the truth about her parents, the lies in that house, the way he had come to know her. His mother was still not moved. "All I am hearing," she said, "is trouble. That kind of background brings trouble." But Chief Emeka kept listening quietly. A few days later, without making noise about it, he decided to visit and see things for himself. When he got there and met Amara, he noticed two things immediately. The first was that the girl was naturally respectful, calm, and decent. The second was that something about that house was wrong. He saw it in the way Amara stood slightly apart, like someone used to taking permission with her own breath. He saw it in the way Auntie Ugochi watched her too closely. He saw it in the tension under the smiles. By the time he left, Chief Emeka was no longer looking at Amara as just a poor girl from a difficult home. He was looking at her as a good girl surrounded by something unjust. And though he did not speak his full thoughts immediately, one thing had begun to change. Obina no longer stood alone. But his mother, Mrs. Ifeoma Eze, was still not convinced. Chief Emeka had returned from the visit with a troubled mind. He had seen enough to know that something was wrong in Uncle Cheek's house. He had also seen enough to know that Amara was not the kind of girl people could dismiss carelessly. She was calm, respectful, and carried herself with quiet decency. But Mrs. Ifeoma was not ready to accept that. For her, love was not enough. Background still mattered. Family still mattered. The home a girl came from still mattered. So when Obina told them again that he wanted to marry Amara, Mrs. Ifeoma looked at him and said, "I will go and see her myself." Obina agreed at once. He thought maybe if his mother met Amara, she would understand. He did not know that Auntie Ugochi was already preparing something else. Word reached the compound that Obina would be coming with his mother. The moment Auntie Ugochi heard it, her mind began to move quickly. If this visit went well, Amara could rise in a way she had never wanted. The rich family could take her away. Kioma could lose the one chance Auntie Ugochi believed should belong to her daughter. So that morning, for the first time in a very long while, Auntie Ugochi called Amara in a softer voice. "Amara?" Amara turned in surprise. "Yes, Auntie?" Auntie Ugochi held out some money. "Take this and go to the market. Buy rice, tomatoes, pepper, onions, oil, and meat. The visitors are coming today. You will cook." Amara stared at the money as if she had heard wrong. "You want me to cook?" she asked quietly. Auntie Ugochi frowned a little as if she was already tired of the question. "Yes. Is there a problem?" "No, Auntie." "Then go quickly." Amara took the money with both hands. Her heart began to beat fast. For once, she did not see the instruction as another burden. She saw it as an opportunity. Maybe this was her chance. Maybe if Obina's mother tasted her food, saw her respect, and watched how she carried herself, something good would happen. Maybe this would help her future. Maybe this was the day she could prove that she was not useless, not a burden, not the bad thing Auntie Ugochi always called her. She hurried to the market with real hope in her chest. She chose everything carefully. She checked the tomatoes one by one. She picked fresh pepper, good onions, clean rice, and the best meat the money could cover. Every decision mattered to her. She was not just cooking food. She was trying to cook her way into a better life. Back at the house, she washed the rice well, blended the pepper, cut the onions, seasoned the meat, and worked with all her heart. That day, even as sweat gathered on her face in the kitchen, there was a quiet joy in her. Kiyoma noticed it and did not like it. Auntie Ugochi noticed it too and hated it. When the food was almost ready, Amara stepped away briefly to rinse a tray and bring clean water from inside. The kitchen was empty for only a short moment, but that was enough. Auntie Ugochi slipped inside, looked once over her shoulder, then quickly lifted the pot cover. Her face was cold. She poured in too much salt. Then, as if that was not enough, she added too much pepper too. Not the kind of mistake a person makes by accident. The kind done on purpose. She stirred lightly, covered the pot again, and stepped out before Amara returned. A little later, the sound of a car entered the compound. Obina had arrived with his mother. Mrs. Ifeoma came down from the car looking neat and composed. She carried herself with the quiet pride of a woman used to respect. Her eyes moved carefully around the compound before settling on the people coming to welcome her. Uncle Cheek greeted her warmly. Auntie Ugochi smiled too quickly. Kiyoma stood nearby, already arranged and dressed to be noticed. Then Amara came out. She had changed into her best simple clothes, nothing expensive, nothing loud, but she looked neat, decent, and respectful. She bent slightly as she greeted. "Good afternoon, Ma." Mrs. Ifeoma looked at her for a second and nodded. "Good afternoon." Amara did not raise her eyes too much. She only stood quietly, then stepped back. Obina noticed the difference immediately. Amara looked nervous, but hopeful. That alone made him both proud and protective. The visitors sat down. A few polite words were exchanged. Uncle Cheek spoke more than necessary. Auntie Ugochi kept smiling too hard. Chioma sat in a way that made sure she could not be ignored. But Obina's mother was not paying much attention to Kiyoma. Her eyes kept returning to Amara. She noticed the girl's quietness. She noticed the respect. She noticed the way Amara stood with care, as if one wrong move could bring trouble. Then Auntie Ugochi said, "Amara, bring the food." Amara quickly went inside and brought it out with both hands. She set everything carefully. The rice looked good. The stew smelled rich. To anyone looking from the outside, it was a well-prepared meal. Obina took the first spoonful. The moment the food touched his tongue, his face changed. He stopped chewing. Mrs. Ifeoma tasted hers too. At once she coughed. The food was terrible. Too much salt. Too much pepper. It was not just bad. It was impossible to eat. The air in the compound changed immediately. Auntie Ugochi jumped into the moment, like someone who had been waiting for it. "Ah!" she cried. "What is this?" Amara froze. Mrs. Ifeoma set down her spoon, her face tight. Obina looked from his plate to Amara. Auntie Ugochi rose halfway from her seat and began shouting, "Amara! What kind of nonsense is this? Are you trying to disgrace us?" Amara's lips parted. "Auntie, Do not speak," Auntie Ugochi snapped. "You cannot even cook ordinary food for visitors?" Uncle Cheek looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Chioma lowered her face slightly to hide the satisfaction in her eyes. Amara stood there, confused and shaken. She knew what she had cooked. She knew it had not tasted like this. Still, in that moment, the whole compound was looking at her as if she had ruined everything. Auntie Ugochi picked up the spoon and pushed it toward her. "Taste it." Amara's hands shook as she took the spoon. She put the food into her mouth. The taste hit her immediately. Her eyes widened. The food was badly spoiled. Salt and pepper sat in it like punishment. Tears rushed into her eyes at once. She knew she had not cooked it that way. But how could she prove it? She stood there in front of everybody, holding the spoon like a child being punished for a crime she did not commit. Mrs. Ifeoma rose to her feet. "Obina," she said shortly, "let us go." "Mom." "I said, let us go." Obina stood up slowly, disturbed and confused. He looked once at Amara. She was still standing there with tears in her eyes, too shocked even to defend herself. He knew something was wrong. He just did not yet know how deep it was. Mrs. Ifeoma turned and walked toward the car. Auntie Ugochi quickly followed with fake apologies. "Please don't be offended. The girl disappointed us too. We did not expect such nonsense. I have always known she was useless, but not to this extent." Mrs. Ifeoma did not answer her. She entered the car. Obina followed. As they drove away, Auntie Ugochi stood in the compound with secret victory rising in her heart. She believed she had won. Inside the house, Amara went into her small room and sat down heavily on the bed. Then she began to cry. Not loud crying. The kind that breaks quietly inside the chest. She had wanted that day to mean something good. Instead, it had turned into another public shame. Back in the city, the silence in the car lasted for a long time. Obina gripped the steering wheel tightly. At last he said, "Mom, that was not normal." Mrs. Ifeoma looked out the window. "I know." Obina turned to her sharply. "You know?" She faced him then. "No woman cooks like that by mistake," she said calmly. "Not that kind of salt. Not that kind of pepper. That was not carelessness. That was deliberate." Obina stared at her. "She was set up," he said. Mrs. Ifeoma did not answer immediately, but her face had changed. When they got home, Chief Amika met them in the sitting room. He took one look at his wife's expression and asked, "What happened?" Mrs. Ifeoma sat down slowly. "The food was ruined." Chief Amika waited and then she added, "But not by accident." Obina stepped in at once. "I knew it." Mrs. Ifeoma nodded once. "No girl who cooked carefully would make that kind of mistake. The amount of salt in that food is too much to be a common cooking error. Somebody wanted to disgrace her." Chief Amaka's face hardened. "And one more thing," Mrs. Ifeoma said. "That girl cannot truly belong to that woman. You can see it without being told. The way she watches her, the way the girl stands. Something does not seem normal in that house." Obina looked at her with hope. "So now you see it?" Mrs. Ifeoma did not answer quickly. She had seen it, yes. But seeing it and accepting it were still two different things inside her. Chief Amaka looked from his son to his wife. Then he said quietly, "Come with me." He led her into their room and closed the door. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Chief Amika faced her fully. "You are fighting this too hard," he said. Mrs. Ifeoma lifted her chin. "I am trying to protect our son." "From what?" "From trouble, from shame, from entering a family that will stain his peace." Chief Amika was silent for a moment. Then he said the one thing she was not expecting. "Have you forgotten where you came from?" Mrs. Ifeoma blinked. He continued. "When I first wanted to marry you, what did my people say? What did people whisper? Did they not say you were from a poor background? Did they not say I could do better? Did they not say you did not belong in this family?" Her face changed slowly. Chief Amaka stepped closer. "And who fought for that marriage?" She said nothing. "I did," he answered for her. "I stood by you when people spoke against you. I married you because I knew what I saw in you. And tell me now, Did your background destroy my life? Mrs. Ifeoma lowered her eyes. No, she said softly. Did you bring me shame? He asked. No. Did you not become part of my peace? Part of my blessing? Part of everything good this family has built? Tears gathered slowly in Mrs. Ifeoma's eyes, but she did not let them fall. Chief Emeka's voice softened. You of all people should understand this. You know what it means to be judged before being known. So why are you doing the same thing to that girl? That question landed heavily. For some time, Mrs. Ifeoma said nothing. Then she sat down slowly on the bed and pressed one hand against her chest. Chief Emeka was right. She had been so focused on class, family name, and appearance that she had almost forgotten her own story. He sat beside her. I am not saying the girl's home is good, he said quietly. It is not, but I do not believe she is the problem there. Mrs. Ifeoma gave a long breath. This time, when she spoke, her voice had lost some of its hardness. I don't know how to move quickly into this. You do not have to move quickly, Chief Emeka replied, but do not stand in the way of what may be right. That humbled her. Not all at once. Not like magic. But enough. Enough for silence to replace opposition. Enough for her resistance to begin to loosen. Later that evening, Obinna was called into the sitting room again. This time, both his parents were there. Chief Emeka looked at him and said, If this is truly your decision, then do it properly. Obinna stared at him for a moment. Dad. Chief Emeka nodded. Prepare the bride price the right way. No half measures. No hidden games. Relief flooded Obinna's face. He looked toward his mother. Mrs. Ifeoma did not smile fully, but she did not object either. That was enough for him to understand that something had shifted. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Then, as if one joy had opened the door for another, he remembered the news he had been carrying. There is something else, he said. His parents looked at him. My company received a major recognition this week. We also secured a strong financial boost for the next phase. Chief Emeka's face lit up with pride. He stood up and embraced his son. My son, he said, you have done well. Even Mrs. Ifeoma's face softened truly now. For the first time that day, she looked at Obinna not as a stubborn son, but as a young man whose life was moving forward. Chief Emeka placed a hand on Obinna's shoulder. Go ahead and do what you must do. We will stand with you. That night, Obinna slept with a peace he had not felt in days. At last, things seemed to be moving in the right direction. Love had survived opposition. His father was on his side. His mother was no longer fighting him. His work was rising too. Everything looked like it was opening. And that was exactly when darkness entered. Back in the village, word reached Auntie Ugochi that the rich family had not turned away after all. Instead of retreating, they were preparing to move forward properly. The news hit her like fire. She sat still for a long moment. Then she rose. Her face had changed. This cannot happen, she said under her breath. Kioma looked at her uneasily. Mummy? But Auntie Ugochi was already thinking far beyond ordinary trouble now. If shame had not stopped Amara, and sabotage had not stopped Amara, then something stronger would have to do it. That evening, when the compound grew quiet, Auntie Ugochi wrapped a cloth around herself and slipped out alone. She did not take the main road. She followed a lonely, narrow path. The farther she walked, the more the air seemed to change. The path grew darker. The trees thickened. The sounds of normal life faded behind her. Ahead of her was a place people did not visit for good reasons. But Auntie Ugochi did not turn back. She kept walking. The path ahead of her was narrow and lonely. The farther she went, the less the road looked like something made for ordinary people. The trees became thicker. Their branches crossed over one another like hands trying to block out the sky. The air felt colder there, even though the night was not cold. The ground was uneven, full of twisted roots and broken branches. At one point, her wrapper brushed against something on the ground. She looked down and saw old animal bones. She paused for 1 second. Only 1 second. Then she kept walking. Her jealousy had already grown stronger than fear. In her heart, she kept repeating the same thing. I will not accept defeat. I will not sit and watch that orphan girl enter wealth while my own daughter remains here. I will not. At last, she reached a giant ancient tree standing deep inside the forbidden part of the forest. Its trunk was thick and dark, wider than two men standing side by side. It looked older than the whole village. Auntie Ugochi looked around once, then raised her hand and knocked 3 times on the tree. Nothing happened at first. Then the silence around her changed. It was not a sound exactly. It was more like the air had moved. From behind the tree, a tall figure stepped out. Its face was covered. Auntie Ugochi felt fear rise in her chest, but she kept her feet planted. The figure said nothing. It only lifted one hand and pointed deeper into the forest. Then it spoke in a low voice. From here you will close your eyes. Auntie Ugochi swallowed. The figure continued. If you open them before you are told, you will regret it. Her mouth went dry, but she nodded. She closed her eyes. A rough hand placed a dry stick into her palm. She held one end. The faceless guide held the other. Then the journey began. She walked with her eyes closed, following the pull of the stick, hearing only strange things around her. Cracking branches, wind that seemed to blow from nowhere, soft sounds in the darkness that did not sound like normal night creatures. By the time she was told to stop, her legs were trembling. Open your eyes. She did. She was now standing in front of a small hut built in a clearing hidden inside the forest. The place looked old and wrong. Small clay pots sat near the entrance. Animal skins hung from one side. A faint fire burned somewhere nearby, though she had not seen anyone light it. Then she saw him. The old dibia sat just outside the hut on a low wooden stool. He was thin, wrapped in dark cloth, with eyes that looked too sharp for his age. He did not look surprised to see her. It was as if he had already known she was coming. For a moment, Auntie Ugochi could not speak. Then the old man said, "Why have you come?" His voice was calm, but it was not gentle. Auntie Ugochi took a breath and stepped forward. "There is a girl in my house." The dibia said nothing. "She is an orphan," Auntie Ugochi continued. "Poor, worth nothing, but a rich young man wants to marry her." The old man kept watching her. "My daughter is there too," she said. "My own daughter, the one who should enjoy such a blessing. But this girl wants to take it." Still, the old man did not speak. Auntie Ugochi's voice hardened. "I want the man to turn away from that girl and choose my daughter instead." The old dibia lowered his eyes briefly, then lifted them again. "That can be done," he said. The relief that rushed into Auntie Ugochi was almost immediate. But the old man lifted one finger. "Nothing is done for free." She nodded quickly. "I will pay." "It is not only money," he said. Then he asked her to come closer. From beside his stool, he brought out a small calabash covered tightly with red cloth. He placed it between them and spoke slowly, so there would be no mistake. "This water will not work by being poured carelessly like medicine into a sick man's mouth," he said. "The first time must be done with intention. Your daughter must be the one to serve him. It should enter his body through something he receives from her hand willingly." Auntie Ugochi listened closely. "After that," he continued, "it must continue for some time in small amounts, not enough to draw attention, food, drink, a little at a time." She nodded again. The old man rested one hand on the calabash. "And when the girl enters his house, this calabash must be hidden in a place where they both sleep. Not openly. Not where any other hand will touch it carelessly." Auntie Ugochi's breathing had grown shallow. The old man's voice became lower. "For 41 nights after the marriage arrangement is secured, your daughter must not confess the truth no matter what happens. She must act like a wife chosen by love. If fear makes her speak too early, what has been tied can break badly." Auntie Ugochi frowned slightly. "What do you mean by badly?" The old man's eyes rested on her. "I mean trouble will return to the house that invited it." She looked away for a moment, then back. "What else?" "Every year," he said, "you will return here with an offering of gratitude while the union stands. Do not eat and forget the hand that fed you. and do not ever pour out what remains in the calabash carelessly on the ground near your house." Auntie Ugochi hesitated only briefly. The old dibia studied her face, then said one final thing. "If this is done, the man's heart will turn. His eyes will move where you want them to move, but understand this clearly: what is forced is never truly at peace." Auntie Ugochi did not care. Peace was not what she came for. Victory was. "I accept," she said. The old man uncovered the calabash for a moment, murmured words over it, then tied the cloth back around it and handed it to her. It felt small in her hands, too small for the damage it could do. "Go," he said. "Will it work?" she asked. The old man looked at her with tired eyes. "You did not come here for truth," he said. "You came for power. Take it and go." That was enough for her. She rose, took the calabash, and followed the faceless guide back out the way she had come. Before dawn, she was back in her room, hiding the calabash beneath old wrappers inside a locked box. By morning, she was already planning. A few days later, Obina returned to Uncle Cheek's compound to continue the formal discussions about bride price and marriage rights. He came with respect. He came with seriousness. He came with no idea that darkness had already reached ahead of him. As soon as Auntie Ugochi heard that he had arrived, she moved quickly. She called Kiyoma into her room and locked the door. Kiyoma looked uneasy. "Mummy, what is it?" Auntie Ugochi uncovered the calabash and poured a little of the water into a metal cup, already prepared for drinking water. Kiyoma stepped back. "What is that?" "Do not ask too many questions," Auntie Ugochi said. "Just listen carefully. You will take this water to him. He must drink from your hand." Kiyoma stared at the cup. "Mummy!" Auntie Ugochi grabbed her arm sharply. "Do you want that girl to take your life from you? Do you want to sit here and watch her become madam in a rich house while you remain here?" Kiyoma's face changed. Jealousy was easier for her to understand than fear. Auntie Ugochi pushed the cup into her hand. "Go." Outside, the men were seated already. Uncle Cheek was talking too much again. Obina was listening politely, though his eyes still searched for signs of Amara. Then Kiyoma came out with the tray. She had dressed neatly, not as boldly as before, but carefully enough to look attractive and composed. She stopped before Obina. "Please, have some water." Obina accepted it without much thought and drank. Auntie Ugochi watched from inside the doorway, her heart beating hard. Nothing happened. Obina did not jerk. He did not blink strangely. He did not suddenly turn and call Kiyoma's name. He simply drank the water and returned the cup. For one brief moment, panic entered Auntie Ugochi's heart. Had she gone into that dark forest for nothing? Had the old man cheated her? But before her fear could settle, Obina spoke. "We should not delay things too much," he said. "If possible, let us move the traditional rites forward." Uncle Cheek looked pleased. "That can be arranged." Obina nodded. "Good. The sooner we do it properly, the better." Auntie Ugochi felt a chill run through her body. To everybody else, it sounded like eagerness. To her, it sounded like proof. The thing had entered. The work had started. That night, she smiled to herself for the first time in days. From then on, she became even more careful. Whenever there was a chance, she found small ways to let Kiyoma be the one to hand something to Obina. A drink, a taste of something, a small act that looked harmless from outside. And slowly, though no one could yet explain it, something about Obina began to shift. Not enough for people to notice openly, but enough for Auntie Ugochi to keep believing. Then the bride price day arrived. The compound was full from early morning. Family members had gathered, elders had come, neighbors stood around pretending not to be watching too closely. Obina's people were present too, and there was movement everywhere. Inside her small room, Amara sat quietly while older women helped her dress. Her wrapper was simple but beautiful. Her blouse was neat. Her hair had been arranged carefully. She looked nervous, but underneath the fear was something she had not allowed herself to feel fully until that day. Hope. She believed this was the day her suffering would finally begin to end. Outside, Obina sat among his people looking calm. Too calm. Now and then his eyes drifted, and there was a strange distance in them that nobody fully understood. But because this was a traditional occasion, people read his quietness as seriousness. Chief Emeka was there too, composed and observant. Mrs. Ifeoma sat beside him, not fully relaxed but present. As the rites continued, the elders spoke, kola nuts were presented, drinks were shared, and questions were asked in the old proper way. At last came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The bride would come out with a cup of palm wine to identify her husband. Inside the room, the women smiled and adjusted Amara's wrapper one last time. One of them said softly, "Go with joy, my daughter." Amara's hands trembled slightly as the cup was placed in them. Then she stepped out. The compound quieted. She walked slowly, her heart beating hard enough to shake her chest. Her eyes searched through the gathering until they found Obinna. He was there. This is it, she told herself. This is the day everything changes. She moved toward him, holding the cup carefully in both hands. People were smiling. Some were already murmuring with approval. Even a few who had always pitied her were beginning to think maybe, just maybe, life had remembered her at last. Amara stopped in front of Obinna and lifted the cup toward him. Her eyes were soft with fear and trust. For one brief second, Obinna looked at her. Then his face changed. He frowned slightly as if something about the moment was wrong. The whole compound seemed to pause. Amara's hand remained stretched toward him. Then Obinna spoke. His voice was clear. "I don't want her." The words did not make sense at first. Amara blinked. Some of the elders frowned, thinking they had heard wrongly. But Obinna continued. "We did not come here for Amara," he said. "We came for Kioma." The world seemed to stop. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the birds in the nearby trees sounded far away. Amara stood there with the cup in her hand, staring at him as if her mind could not catch up with what her ears had just heard. Around her, faces changed one after another. Shock, confusion, disbelief. Mrs. Ifeoma turned sharply to her husband. Chief Emeka's face went hard. Uncle Cheek looked stunned, though not for the same reason Amara was. And Auntie Ugochi lowered her eyes quickly to hide the dark satisfaction rising inside her. Kioma stood frozen for a second, then slowly straightened. Amara's hand began to shake. The cup nearly slipped from her fingers. She looked at Obinna again, waiting for his face to soften, for him to say it was a mistake, for him to stand up and correct himself. He did not. He only said again, "The one I want is Kioma." That was when the truth of it hit her. Not in private. Not behind a closed door. Not with kindness. But there, in front of elders, visitors, family, and the same people who had always treated her as if she was nothing. The shame entered her chest like a knife. Her throat tightened. Her eyes filled at once. Somewhere behind her, someone gasped. Another person murmured, "What is this?" But Amara did not stay to hear more. The cup slipped from her hand and fell. Then she turned and ran. She ran past the women near the doorway, past the side of the house, past every stare, past every whisper. She ran with tears blinding her eyes and her heart breaking so loudly inside her that it felt as if the whole world must be hearing it. And behind her, the compound remained frozen in disbelief. For a few long seconds, nobody seemed to know what to say. Then voices began to rise, not in celebration, in shock. Chief Emeka stood up at once, his face dark with anger. "Obinna, what is the meaning of this?" Mrs. Ifeoma was already on her feet too. "What kind of disgrace is this?" Justin, who had come with Obinna's people, looked completely embarrassed. He had never seen his friend behave like that before. He looked toward the direction Amara had run and felt sick inside. He had once laughed when Obinna first spoke about her. Now he was not laughing at all. The village elders were also visibly upset. One of them shook his head and said, "This is not how a man behaves. If he did not want the girl, he should not have brought families together like this." Another elder added, "This is dishonor. This is public shame." People began murmuring openly. Women near the doorway exchanged looks of pity and anger. Men sitting in the compound shifted in discomfort. The joy of the gathering died immediately. What should have been a day of honor had turned into something ugly. But while others were still trying to understand what had happened, Auntie Ugochi moved quickly. She was not shocked. She was ready. She turned to Uncle Cheek and spoke in a low, urgent voice. "Do not start looking at Amara's tears now, think." Uncle Cheek looked unsettled. "This is bad, Ugochi. This is very bad." "Bad?" she whispered sharply. "What is bad there? A billionaire's family still came to this house. The groom still chose from this house. Do you know what that means?" Uncle Cheek hesitated. Auntie Ugochi leaned closer. "It means the blessing has not left this compound. It has only changed direction." He stared at her. She continued. "Forget Amara for 1 second. Think of Kioma. Think of the kind of life she can enter. Think of what this can do for this family." He still looked disturbed, but his weakness was already rising. Auntie Ugochi knew her husband well. His conscience was not strong. It only needed greed to weaken it further. "Do not be foolish," she said. "If we lose this chance because you suddenly want to remember pity, we may never see another one like it." Uncle Cheek looked down, not because he agreed fully, but because greed had already started doing its work. In front of everyone, Chief Emeka's anger had not reduced. He looked at his son and said, "I cannot support nonsense like this." Mrs. Ifeoma added bitterly, "You have humiliated that girl before the whole village." But Obinna only sat there, strangely calm, his face distant. That frightened Justin more than anything else. If Obinna had shouted, argued, or acted proud, it would have still felt like him. But this quiet emptiness did not feel like his friend. It felt wrong. The elders stepped in before the situation could become worse. One of the oldest men stood and said firmly, "Nothing more will happen today. This ceremony cannot continue like this." Another nodded. "Let everybody go home. If there is any truth left in this matter, it can be sorted later, but not today." So the traditional marriage was postponed. Not ended. Postponed. That small difference mattered deeply to Auntie Ugochi. It meant there was still room to push things further. It meant the door had not completely closed. As people began to leave, disappointment covered the compound like dust after a storm. Chief Emeka walked out in anger. Mrs. Ifeoma followed with a troubled heart. Justin left ashamed and disturbed. The villagers talked in low voices as they scattered. And somewhere behind the house, Amara was still crying alone. Later that evening, inside the same compound, Auntie Ugochi and Kioma celebrated quietly. Not with dancing, not openly, but with the cold satisfaction of people who believed they had won something. Kioma sat in her room, still dressed better than usual, looking at herself in the mirror with a new kind of pride. "Mummy," she said softly, "did you see their faces?" Auntie Ugochi smiled. "Let them look." Kioma touched her necklace and asked, "Do you think it will still happen?" Auntie Ugochi's eyes sharpened. "It will happen. That girl has already fallen. Now we only need to move wisely." Inside the house, Amara was still physically present. But emotionally, something in her had disappeared. She moved. She answered when spoken to. She washed plates, swept and fetched water. But inside, she was gone. She cried alone in her room that night until her eyes burned. Then she cried again the next day. And the day after that, she kept replaying everything. Their first meeting, the broken glass, the river, the day he stood between her and Auntie Ugochi's cane, the oranges in the market, the way he had looked at her and said, "I love you," the way he had told her he wanted something true. She replayed every word until she began to wonder whether she had imagined everything. Maybe she had misunderstood him. Maybe she had been foolish. Maybe poor girls like her only heard love because they were hungry for it. That thought hurt even more than his rejection. The deeper pain was not just that she had lost Obinna. It was that she had allowed herself to believe she could be chosen. And Auntie Ugochi did not let that wound rest. Whenever she passed Amara, she found a new way to press on it. One afternoon, as Amara washed clothes quietly in the backyard, Auntie Ugochi stood over her and said, "This is what happens when poor girls forget themselves." Amara said nothing. Auntie Ugochi continued, "A person should know her level. If you had known yours, you would not have let your head rise like that." Kioma had also changed. She now carried herself as if some final thing had already been settled. She no longer looked at Amara with simple jealousy. She looked at her with victory. Sometimes she would stand before the mirror and ask loudly, "Mummy, do you think city life will suit me?" Or she would say, "I hope I do not forget this village when I move into wealth." Each word was aimed like a stone. Amara became quieter than ever, but inside her, grief was growing into something heavy and dangerous. Not anger yet, not revenge, just a deep dark weight that sat in her chest and would not lift. Meanwhile, things moved quickly in another direction. After the ceremony disaster, Kioma began spending more time around Obina. At first it was in small ways, short visits, formal excuses, a reason to bring food, a reason to check on something left unfinished. Then, little by little, those visits stretched longer. Because Obina was no longer acting like himself, he did not resist. He no longer behaved like a man with strong will. He had become strangely emptied out, passive, distant, emotionally flat. He was not violent, he was not rude, he was simply not fully there. And Auntie Ugochi used that. Before long, Chioma moved into Obina's mansion as the intended bride. Once inside, her true nature came out fully. She began ordering the staff around as if she had owned the place all her life. "If tea was late," she shouted. If the floor was not shining enough, she complained. If a maid entered a room without knocking twice, she spoke like a queen insulted by peasants. The staff noticed immediately that she was not like the kind, quiet girl they had imagined their master would one day bring home. She was harsh, suspicious, controlling. Most of all, she was protective of the bedroom. She did not want anyone near it. She would clean it herself or pretend to. She did not allow the maids to arrange the space under the bed. She did not want hands searching there, because wrapped and hidden beneath that bed was the calabash Auntie Ugochi had told her never to expose. It remained there like a silent evil breathing under the house. And Obina? He moved around his own mansion like a man who no longer belonged to himself. He obeyed too easily. He spoke too little. His eyes often looked empty, like someone had entered his life and pulled the light out of it. Sometimes he sat for long stretches without saying anything. Sometimes Kioma spoke to him sharply, and he simply nodded. The staff began whispering among themselves. "This is not our master. What has happened to him?" "He is here, but he is not here." It was frightening to watch. He was present in body, absent in spirit. And that was what made the whole thing feel worse than ordinary heartbreak. Back at his family home, Mrs. Ifeoma had begun to notice too many things. At first it was the silence. Obina no longer called regularly. When he did call, his voice sounded wrong. Low, tired, empty. Not like a man excited about marriage. Not like a man in love. Not even like a man who had simply made a terrible choice and was standing boldly in it. No. He sounded drained, as if someone else was speaking through a closed door. A mother's instinct does not sleep easily. Mrs. Ifeoma became restless. One day, without warning him ahead, she went to the mansion. She arrived quietly and began watching. The house felt strange. Not loud. Not violent. Just wrong. The staff greeted her carefully. Too carefully. Their faces carried the kind of fear people wear when they know something is off but do not know if speaking will cost them their jobs. Chioma came out smiling too brightly, pretending to be respectful. "Welcome, Ma," she said. Mrs. Ifeoma looked at her for a long second. "Where is Obina?" "He is inside resting," Chioma answered quickly. Mrs. Ifeoma nodded and kept looking around. She noticed the tension in the house, the silence, the way even the air seemed tight. Later, when Kioma was distracted, one of the maids quietly came near Mrs. Ifeoma in the kitchen. The girl's voice was low. "Madam, Mrs. Ifeoma turned. Yes? The maid hesitated, then said, Please do not mention my name. Mrs. Ifeoma's face became still. Speak. The maid swallowed hard. Since Madame Chioma came, everything has changed. She controls the whole house. She talks to everybody anyhow. And Master? The girl shook her head. He does not behave like himself anymore. Mrs. Ifeoma's heart tightened. What do you mean? He just sits. He agrees. He does not even get angry the way a normal person would. It is like... The girl stopped. Like what? Like something is wrong with him. That confirmed her fear. Mrs. Ifeoma had already suspected it. Now she felt it more strongly. This was no longer ordinary romance gone bad. Something deeper was wrong. Something unnatural. She left that house with a heavy heart and drove straight to Uncle Chaik's compound. If she could not find truth in her son's house, maybe she would find pain in the girl he had once loved. When she saw Amara again, her heart ached. The girl looked broken. Not only sad, broken. Her eyes had lost the soft light they once carried. She greeted politely as always, but the pain inside her was too obvious to hide. Good afternoon, Ma, Amara said quietly. Mrs. Ifeoma looked at her for a moment, then said gently, Come and sit with me. They sat in a corner where the others could not hear clearly. For a while, Mrs. Ifeoma said nothing. Then she spoke softly. I do not believe Obinna changed naturally. Amara lifted her eyes slowly. Tears gathered almost at once. Mrs. Ifeoma continued, I do not know everything yet, but I know my son. Something is wrong. Amara's lips trembled. Then why did he do that to me? Mrs. Ifeoma's own face tightened with pain. I do not know yet, but I will find out. That was the first time since the ceremony that Amara felt somebody speak to her pain without blaming her for it. Mrs. Ifeoma reached out and held her hand. I promise you, she said, I will fight for the truth. Amara lowered her head and cried quietly. Not loud, not dramatically. Just the tears of a person who had been carrying too much alone. After some time, Mrs. Ifeoma made up her mind. Pack a few things, she said. Come with me for now. Amara looked up in surprise. But before she could answer, Auntie Ugochi's voice cut through the air. Come with you where? Mrs. Ifeoma turned. Auntie Ugochi and Uncle Cheek were already coming toward them. Mrs. Ifeoma rose calmly. She cannot remain here like this. Auntie Ugochi folded her arms. She is our family matter. Mrs. Ifeoma's face hardened slightly. That is the same thing you people say whenever somebody wants to stop wickedness. Uncle Cheek spoke weakly. Madame, this is our house. We will handle our own. Mrs. Ifeoma looked at him with open disappointment. Will you? Is that what you have been doing all these years? He lowered his eyes. But Auntie Ugochi was not moved. She did not want Amara anywhere near people who might uncover too much. She is not leaving with you, she said. Whatever has happened, she remains under our care. Mrs. Ifeoma wanted to argue further, but she could already see that forcing the matter there might make things worse for Amara immediately after she left. So she stepped back, not because she had accepted defeat, but because she now understood how guarded they had become. She looked at Amara one last time and said softly, Be strong. Then she turned and left. But she did not leave defeated. She left more determined than ever. Not long after that, strange things began to happen. One evening, Uncle Chaik returned home late and slightly tired. The compound was quiet. He was walking toward the back of the house when he suddenly stopped. Someone was standing near the mango tree. A man, dressed in white. Still, silent. Uncle Chaik's heart jumped. The face looked painfully familiar. It looked like Amika Okiki, Amara's dead father, his elder brother. The figure did not speak. It only stood there with tears running silently down its face. Uncle Chaik's legs almost failed him. He blinked hard. The figure was still there. He took one frightened step back, then another. By the time he shouted and looked again, it was gone. He told nobody that night, but fear had entered him. and it did not leave. A few days later, Auntie Ugochi had her own encounter. She woke at night with the feeling that someone was standing by her door. At first, she thought it was part of a dream. Then she opened her eyes fully. There in the dimness stood the same white figure, still, silent, weeping, her breath caught in her throat. She sat up so fast that her wrapper almost fell from her shoulder. The figure did not move toward her. It only stood there as if looking straight into her guilt. Then, just as suddenly, it was gone. Auntie Ugochi began to shake. Whether it was truly the dead returning, or something else rising from what they had called into their lives, one truth became impossible to ignore. The dark work they had done was no longer staying quietly on their side. The house changed after that. The old confidence was gone. The pride that had once sat comfortably in the rooms began to crack. Uncle Cheek grew jumpy. Auntie Ugochi became watchful in a new way. Even Chioma, though far away in the mansion, began feeling a strange unease whenever night came. Fear had entered where wickedness once felt safe, and that was only the beginning. The house changed after that. The fear that had started in Uncle Cheek's compound did not stay there. It reached the mansion too. At first, Chioma tried to ignore it. The first signs were small enough to dismiss. A door would make a sound at night when nobody had touched it. Heavy footsteps would pass outside the bedroom when the corridor was empty. Once she woke up suddenly because she was sure someone had laughed softly near the window. When she checked, there was nobody there. Another time, she arranged her makeup items carefully on the dressing table before sleeping. By morning, 2 of them had shifted from where she left them. She told herself it was nothing. She told herself she was only tense. But the strange things did not stop. Instead, they grew worse. The bedroom itself began to feel wrong. Sometimes in the middle of the night, the room would suddenly turn cold. Not the normal coolness of air, a deep coldness that felt as if something had entered and was standing still inside it. Chioma would sit up and hold the bedsheet tightly around herself, her eyes moving through the darkness. Sometimes she felt as though someone was standing near the bed, not outside the room, inside it, watching. Once she woke up and heard a slow sound under the bed, as if something hard had rolled lightly from one side to the other. Her whole body went weak. She knew what was hidden there. The calabash. From that night onward, her fear deepened. She stopped sleeping properly. She became sharper with the staff, more suspicious, more controlling. If a maid entered the room without permission, Chioma shouted. If someone came too close to the bed, Chioma drove the person out. One afternoon, a maid tried to sweep properly under the bed, and Chioma slapped the broom from her hand so hard that the girl nearly fell. "Who told you to touch there?" she shouted. The maid stared at her in fear. "Madam, I was only cleaning." "Then clean where I ask you to clean," Chioma snapped, "not where your eyes carry you." After that, the staff became even more afraid of her. But fear did not help Chioma, because the very place she was protecting had become the center of her torment. That was where the coldness seemed strongest. That was where the footsteps always seemed to end. That was where she felt the strange presence most clearly. The evil she had welcomed into the house had started breathing there, and Obina was still not himself. He moved through the mansion like a man whose spirit had been wrapped in cloth. He answered when spoken to, but only with short words. He followed instructions too easily. He no longer looked at people with real feeling in his eyes. If Chioma told him to sit, he sat. If she told him to come inside, he came. There was no fire in him, no protest, no real presence. Watching him had begun to unsettle even Chioma. This was not the rich man she had wanted. This was someone present in body but absent in soul. One night, Mrs. Ifeoma woke up in a cold sweat. She sat up sharply on the bed, breathing hard. Chief Amika turned at once. "What is it?" She pressed one hand to her chest. "I had a dream." He was fully awake now. "What kind of dream?" Mrs. Ifeoma looked deeply disturbed. "I saw Obina trapped inside a bottle. A small bottle. He was knocking from inside it like someone locked away. He looked weak, drained. He was crying for help, but his voice sounded far." Chief Emeka sat up slowly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he asked quietly, "Do you think this is about him?" Mrs. Ifeoma nodded. Yes. The room was silent. At last she said, "Something is wrong. I have been feeling it for days. But now I am sure it is deeper than confusion or bad decision." Chief Emeka was already thinking too. He remembered the ceremony. He remembered how Obina had once spoken of Amara with conviction, with softness, with certainty. Then suddenly, in front of everybody, he had turned and chosen Kioma. That kind of change was too sharp, too unnatural. Mrs. Ifeoma got out of bed. "I want to pray." He rose too. "Then we will pray." That night, husband and wife prayed together with a seriousness they had not carried in a long time. Not out of panic, not out of show, but out of deep unease. After prayer, they sat again and began to talk through everything slowly. The first meeting. The way Obina had loved Amara. The sabotage with the food. The sudden reversal at the traditional marriage. The strange emptiness in him now. Kioma's new place in the mansion. The cold feeling around the whole matter. By the end of that conversation, both of them had reached the same conclusion. This was more than manipulation. There was likely spiritual interference. From that day, they began to watch more carefully. Mrs. Ifeoma pressed harder, but quietly. She asked staff members simple questions. She studied reactions. She paid attention to details other people might dismiss. Chief Emeka did the same in his own way, speaking less but observing more. Under that pressure, the guilty began to crack. Uncle Cheek was the weakest of them all. He had helped cover wickedness for years, but he had never carried the same hard heart his wife carried. He was guilty, yes, but not settled in guilt the way Auntie Ugochi was. And now fear was destroying whatever comfort greed had given him. The more he saw that white, weeping figure that looked like his dead brother, the more his peace disappeared. He started drinking more. At first it was one extra bottle in the evening. Then it became something he reached for earlier in the day. He grew restless. He would sit outside the house and stare into space. Sometimes he muttered to himself. Sometimes he looked at Amara as if he wanted to speak and could not. He started remembering too much. The day his brother died. The day Amara first arrived as a little girl with swollen eyes and no parents. The time she was insulted in front of him and he said nothing. The lies he told about her. The meals she served without eating. The beatings he allowed. The nights he chose silence because it was easier than confronting his wife. Now every one of those moments returned to him like witnesses. One evening, he was sitting alone with a drink when he suddenly looked up and saw the white figure again near the mango tree. This time it did not disappear quickly. It stood there, still and silent, tears running down its face. Uncle Chike's hands began to shake. "My brother," he whispered. The figure said nothing. But its silence felt like judgment. Uncle Cheek dropped his cup. When the figure was gone, he remained seated there, trembling. The pressure was pushing him toward confession. Back at the mansion, matters were getting worse. One rainy night, Kioma woke up because she heard slow, heavy footsteps moving around the bed. Not outside the door. Around the bed. Step. 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 She sat up suddenly, her throat dry. Obina was lying beside her, staring into nothing as though he had heard nothing at all. Then Kioma heard it again. A soft laugh. Very close. She jumped off the bed and screamed. Staff came running, lights came on, the house stirred awake. But by the time people entered, Kioma was standing in one corner of the room, shaking and pointing at the bed. "There is something here," she cried. "There is something in this room." The staff looked at one another helplessly. No one saw anything. The next morning, word reached Mrs. Ifeoma that Kioma had screamed through the night and almost refused to go back into the bedroom. That was enough. She and Chief Emeka went to the mansion together. When they arrived, Kioma looked tired and irritated. Her face had lost some of its earlier pride. Mrs. Ifeoma did not waste time. "I want to see the room," she said. Kioma stiffened. "There is nothing there." Mrs. Ifeoma looked at her steadily. Then you should have no problem showing it. Chioma hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Chief Emeka said quietly, "Open the door." Chioma obeyed, but unwillingly. The moment Mrs. Ifeoma stepped into the bedroom, she felt it. The room was cold. Not everywhere. Around the bed. She said nothing at first. She only kept looking. Then one of the maids, the same frightened girl who had once tried to sweep there, spoke nervously from the doorway. "Madam, she never lets anyone touch under that bed." Chioma turned sharply. "Shut up." But it was too late. Mrs. Ifeoma faced the maids. "Move the bed." Chioma panicked at once. "No!" Chief Emeka's eyes fixed on her. "Why not?" Chioma's breathing had changed. Mrs. Ifeoma's voice grew firmer. "Move it." The maids hesitated, then obeyed. The bed shifted. And there, wrapped in white cloth beneath it, lay the calabash. For one long moment, nobody moved. The room fell into a strange silence. Chioma's face drained of color. Mrs. Ifeoma stared at the thing on the floor with a cold certainty rising inside her. Chief Emeka's face hardened. The maid at the door crossed herself and stepped back. "What is that?" Mrs. Ifeoma asked quietly. Chioma said nothing. Her lips had started trembling. Mrs. Ifeoma stepped closer but did not touch it at once. "I asked you a question." Chioma shook her head. "I don't know." It was a weak lie. Chief Emeka looked at her with deep disappointment. "Do not insult us further." The room felt colder now. Chioma looked from the calabash to their faces and back again. Her fear was no longer ordinary. It was the fear of someone who knew the secret had been found, and that the thing she had helped hide was no longer hiding. Mrs. Ifeoma spoke carefully. "This is why my son changed, isn't it?" Chioma pressed both hands to her mouth. Tears came into her eyes. She still did not answer. Chief Emeka said, "Call her mother." Chioma did not move. Mrs. Ifeoma stepped forward, her voice no longer soft. "Speak." That was when something in Chioma broke. She sank onto the floor and began to cry. Not proud crying. Not controlled crying. The kind that comes when fear has finally eaten through all the lies. "Mummy said it was the only way," she sobbed. Nobody spoke. Chioma kept crying. She said if we did nothing, Amara would leave us behind. She said Obina would take her and forget us all. She said this was the only way. Mrs. Ifeoma's heart pounded heavily. What way? Chioma looked at the calabash as if it had become alive. Then the words came. Broken. Shaking. Ugly. She confessed that her mother went into the forest. She confessed there was a dibia. She confessed that the old man gave them prepared water. She confessed that the first time it entered Obina's body was through the water she served him herself. She confessed that after that, little by little, it was added to what he ate and drank whenever he came around. She confessed that the calabash had to be hidden under the bed when she entered his house. She confessed that they were warned not to speak too early. She confessed that there were yearly offerings expected in return. By the time she finished, the room felt heavier than before. Mrs. Ifeoma sat down slowly on a chair nearby. Chief Emeka closed his eyes for one short second. Now they understood. Obina had not willingly turned away from Amara. He had been spiritually manipulated. Every strange sign now had a shape. Every fear now had a source. The evil that had stolen their son's mind had an object, a doorway, and a beginning. Mrs. Ifeoma looked at Chioma through tears of anger and pain. You helped destroy an innocent girl, she said quietly. Chioma cried harder. I was afraid. Mummy said. She said, Chief Emeka cut in, and you followed. Not long after, Auntie Ugochi and Uncle Chika were brought there. The moment Auntie Ugochi entered the bedroom and saw the white cloth unwrapped beside the bed, she knew. Her face changed. Chioma was still crying on the floor. Uncle Cheek looked like a man already half broken by fear. Mrs. Ifeoma stood. Her voice was calm now, and that calmness was more frightening than shouting. We know! Auntie Ugochi tried to speak. Know what? Chief Emeka pointed to the calabash. Enough! For a moment, Auntie Ugochi still looked ready to deny everything. Then Uncle Cheek gave a weak sound beside her like a man too tired to lie anymore. His eyes were red. His face looked old. And somehow in that room, with the calabash exposed, Kioma crying, and the weight of all their fear gathered around them, even Auntie Ugochi's hardness began to crack. The truth was now out, and nobody in that room could hide comfortably anymore. For a long moment the bedroom remained silent except for Chioma's crying. Mrs. Ifeoma stood very still, her face pale with pain and anger. Chief Emeka looked at the calabash on the floor as if he wanted to crush it with his bare hands, but he stopped himself. No, Mrs. Ifeoma said quietly. He turned to her. She shook her head. Not like that. We do not know what was tied to it. We cannot handle it carelessly. Chief Emeka breathed slowly and nodded. She was right. This thing had entered their son's life through darkness. It had to be broken properly. Mrs. Ifeoma straightened and said, "Call Pastor Samuel." Pastor Samuel Okori was not a noisy man. He was an older pastor their family trusted, a man who spoke softly but carried weight. He was the kind of person people called when they wanted truth, not performance. He came that same day. When he arrived and heard everything, he did not shout. He did not dramatize the matter. He only listened carefully while Kioma repeated her confession through tears. Then he looked at the calabash and said, "This is not something to play with." He asked that Obina be brought immediately. When Obina entered the room and saw the people gathered there, his face showed the same strange emptiness that had been haunting everyone. Pastor Samuel watched him for a moment and then said, "He must be prayed for. The object must be renounced, exposed, and destroyed before God openly. No hiding, no secret handling. Everything that was done in darkness must be dragged into the light." That evening they all went to the church. Not for a Sunday service, for a fight. The church was quiet when they entered. A few trusted elders were there. The prayer team was there. Nothing about the place felt dramatic, but everything felt serious. The calabash was placed inside a metal basin in front of the altar. Obina sat in the front row between his parents. Kioma sat some distance away, crying quietly. Uncle Cheek looked weak and broken. Auntie Ugochi refused at first to kneel, but nobody was looking at her with fear anymore. The power had shifted. She was no longer the loud woman controlling a compound. She was a woman standing before her own shame. Pastor Samuel began with prayer. Then he told them all clearly, before anything is broken, truth must speak fully. He turned to Kioma first. "Say again what was done." And Kioma did. This time, not in one frightened rush, but slowly, clearly, with everybody hearing. She said her mother went into the forest. She said the dibia gave them prepared water. She said she was the one who first served it to Obina. She said small drops were added again and again. She said the calabash was hidden under the bed. She said they were warned not to confess too early. Each word dropped into the church like a stone. Then Pastor Samuel turned to Auntie Ugochi. "Do you deny it?" For a moment Auntie Ugochi said nothing. Then Uncle Cheek suddenly broke. He fell to his knees and began to weep. Not quiet tears. The broken crying of a man whose sins had finally become too heavy to carry. "I knew things were wrong," he said. "I did not stop it. I lied about the child. I failed my brother. I failed that girl. I failed God." His voice shook badly. "I watched my brother's daughter suffer under my roof and I did nothing." That confession broke something open in the room. Auntie Ugochi looked at him in disbelief. Then she looked around and saw it. Nobody was standing with her anymore. Her mouth opened, but what came out first was not denial. It was fear. Her shoulders began to shake. Pastor Samuel looked at her and said, "This is the time to speak truth. Lies will not help you here." And slowly, like poison finally leaving a wound, Auntie Ugochi confessed too. She spoke of the forest, the faceless guide, the old tree, the old dibia, the instructions, the jealousy that pushed her there. She even admitted that she never cared whether peace would leave the house as long as Amara lost Obina. When she finished, the whole church was silent. Pastor Samuel then stood before the metal basin holding the calabash and said, "Everything tied through darkness, let it break by truth and by the name of God." Prayer began. Not soft prayer, deep prayer. The kind that comes from people who know they are standing between bondage and freedom. Mrs. Ifeoma prayed with tears in her eyes. Chief Emeka prayed like a man fighting for his son. The elders prayed. Pastor Samuel anointed Obinna's head and shoulders and placed his hand on him. At first, nothing happened. Then Obinna's face tightened. His hands trembled. He bent forward as if something inside him was being pulled in two directions at once. Mrs. Ifeoma reached for him, but Pastor Samuel shook his head gently. Let him breathe. The prayers grew stronger. Obinna began to shake his head slowly, like a man trapped inside fog. Then suddenly he cried out. It was not loud, but it was full of pain. His face twisted with confusion, then horror. He clutched his chest and began to weep. Not the empty tears of a man under pressure. The real tears of someone waking up and finding blood on his own hands. Images were returning. The river, Amara's face, her laughter, her fear, the promise he made, the cup of palm wine in her trembling hand, her face when he rejected her, the sound of it, the shame of it. He bent over and cried like a broken man. Mrs. Ifeoma was crying too now. Chief Emeka gripped his son's shoulder tightly. Pastor Samuel continued praying until Obinna's breathing slowly steadied. Then the pastor looked at the calabash and said, "It is finished." He poured anointed oil over it, prayed again, and broke it inside the metal basin. The smell that came out was strange and sharp. The church workers quickly carried the basin outside to a prepared fire behind the church compound. There, under prayer and watchful eyes, the broken pieces and cloth were burned completely. No one treated it casually. No one touched it carelessly. And as the flames rose, something changed in Obinna's eyes. The emptiness was leaving. Confusion was still there. Pain was there. But he was back. Really back. When they returned home that night, he did not speak much. He sat quietly in the living room with his parents until the house had gone still. Then he covered his face with both hands and said in a broken voice, "What did I do to her?" Mrs. Ifeoma sat beside him. "It was not your will." "But it was my mouth," he said, tears falling again. "It was my face, my voice. I did that to her in front of everybody." Chief Emeka, who was not a man given easily to emotion, looked away for a moment before saying quietly, "Then you must spend the rest of your strength making it right." The next morning, Obinna asked for only one thing. "I need to see Amara." But before that could happen, Mrs. Ifeoma and Chief Emeka went themselves to Uncle Cheek's house and brought Amara out. This time, nobody stopped them. Uncle Chike was too ashamed to raise his head. Auntie Ugochi sat inside one corner of the house, muttering to herself, her face already looking strange and unsettled. Kioma did not even come out. Amara packed her few things slowly. Her hands shook, but her face remained quiet. When she stepped out of that compound, it was the first time she left it not as a servant sent on an errand, but as someone finally being taken into safety. Mrs. Ifeoma brought her to their mansion in the city. She gave her a room of her own. Clean, quiet, safe. The first night Amara slept there, she still woke up in fear twice, thinking someone would bang on the door and order her outside, but nobody did. For the first time in years, she slept in peace. A day later, Obinna came to see her. He did not enter her room with confidence. He stood at the door like a man who knew he had no right to ask for anything. Amara looked up when she heard the knock. When she saw him, her heart moved painfully inside her chest. He looked thinner, tired, real again, but still the same man whose mouth had broken her in public. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. Amara hesitated, then nodded once. Obinna entered and remained standing for a moment before slowly sitting in the chair opposite her. Neither of them spoke at first. Then he said, "I remember now." Amara lowered her eyes. Obinna swallowed hard. "I remember the river. I remember what I said to you. I remember the market. I remember promising you something true. His voice was shaking. And I remember what I did. Amara's eyes filled, but she remained silent. Obina did not defend himself. He did not speak like a rich man trying to explain his way out of shame. He spoke like a broken man. I am sorry, he said. Not the kind of sorry people say because they want peace. I am sorry because I know what I took from you. I know what I did to your heart. Amara finally looked at him. Her voice was low. You rejected me before everybody. Obina closed his eyes briefly. I know. I stood there with the cup in my hand. He nodded once, tears gathering again. I know. You made me feel like I dreamed the whole thing. This time his tears fell. He did not wipe them quickly. I know, he whispered, and I will hate that memory for the rest of my life. Amara turned her face away. She knew now what had happened. She knew he had been spiritually manipulated, but knowing truth did not erase what her heart had lived through. That was the hard part. Obina looked at her and said quietly, even when my mouth rejected you, my soul never stopped being yours. That broke something inside her. Not enough to heal her, but enough to make her cry. Obina did not move toward her. He did not try to hold her. He only said, I am not here to demand forgiveness. I am here to tell you the truth and to wait for whatever you decide. For several days after that, Amara kept her distance. She spoke politely. She did not shut him out completely, but she did not run into his arms either. And that was real. That was human. Love had survived. Trust had not yet healed. Obina accepted it. He greeted her gently when he saw her. He gave her time. He did not push. He let his actions speak more than his promises now. Slowly, Amara began to soften. Not because she forgot, but because she could see his remorse was real. Back in the village, consequences had already begun to fall. Once the truth spread, it spread everywhere. People talked in compounds, in markets, on roads, by wells, outside churches. The story traveled far and fast. How Auntie Ugochi went into darkness because of jealousy. How Kiyoma helped deceive a man into choosing her. How Uncle Chaik failed his late brother's daughter. How the orphan girl had been innocent all along. The very thing Auntie Ugochi wanted most, status through marriage, became the thing that destroyed her name. She could not carry it. One afternoon, after another night of muttering and fear, something in her finally snapped. She ran out of the compound barefoot, her wrapper loose, her hair scattered, shouting broken things into the air. She was not supposed to win. I did it for my daughter. Why is he crying? Tell him to stop looking at me. Villagers stopped and stared. Some were shocked. Some shook their heads. Some said openly, it is good for her. Others said, see what wickedness has done. Children followed at a distance until older people drove them away. Auntie Ugochi ran through the village like a woman chased by the very darkness she had invited. Kiyoma's own disgrace was complete. She stopped stepping out. She stayed hidden in her room, unable to bear the stares, the whispers, the shame. The story had gone too far. People no longer saw her as the lucky girl who almost married into wealth. They saw her as the girl who stole another woman's joy through darkness. Even those who once envied her now avoided her. And slowly the truth settled like a curse over her future. No respectable family wanted to join themselves to that scandal. No man wanted to marry into that story. Uncle Chaik became the quietest of them all. He walked like a man carrying stones inside his chest. When he passed through the village, people looked at him not with respect, but with disappointment. He had failed his brother. He had failed justice. He had failed a child placed in his hands. When the village elders gathered, they said openly that he was no longer qualified to stand as family over Amara in any marriage matter. He had lost that right. And so when the time came for things to be done properly again, the elders of Amara's father's kindred rose for her instead. This time, Obina did not do anything in secret. No quiet meetings. No hidden promises. no confusion. He returned openly and properly for Amara, with his parents standing beside him in full support. By then, Amara had regained some life in her face. She was still soft, still humble, but no longer looked like someone buried under daily pain. When the convoy entered the village, people came out again. But the feeling was different this time. The first time they had gathered to watch a poor orphan's humiliation. Now they were gathering to watch her honor restored. The ceremony was held properly, with dignity and joy. This time, when family matters were called, it was the elders from her father's kindred who stood and spoke. One old man, his voice steady with emotion, said, "Our brother's daughter was failed in one house, but she was not abandoned by her blood. Today we stand for her." Those words nearly brought Amara to tears. Chief Amika spoke with respect. Mrs. Ifeoma sat beside Amara at one point and adjusted her wrapper with the care of a mother. No one could miss what had happened. The same woman who once looked at Amara with doubt now stood beside her with full love. And this time, when the cup was placed in Amara's hands, the whole village seemed to hold its breath. She walked forward slowly again. But this walk was different. Her hands trembled, yes. Her heart beat fast, yes. But she was no longer walking toward confusion. She was walking toward truth. Obina rose before she even reached him. Not because custom demanded it, because his heart did. When she stopped before him, he took the cup from her hand gently and drank. Then he looked at her the way he should have looked at her that first terrible day. Fully, clearly, and with love nobody could mistake. The compound broke into relieved joy. Women ululated. Men smiled and nodded. Some elders even laughed with the happiness of seeing wrong corrected before the end of life. Amara's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not tears of shame. They were tears of restoration. The bride price was performed correctly and joyfully. Obina's family treated her with honor in every step. And when the time came for her to leave with them, she did not go like a servant escaping pain. She went like a daughter being honored. In the city, Mrs. Ifeoma truly became the mother figure Amara had lost too early. She taught her gently, cared for her, spoke to her with love, and gave her the kind of protection that did not wound. Amara often found herself looking at her in quiet surprise, still not fully used to being spoken to kindly by an older woman. One evening, after all the noise of the celebrations had settled, and the house had grown calm, Amara stood on the balcony outside her room, looking at the lights below. Obina came and stood beside her. For a moment they said nothing. Then he said softly, "You almost lost everything because of me." Amara shook her head. "Not because of you. Because of what people allowed." Obina looked at her. "Still, I hate that pain touched you through me." Amara turned to him slowly. "I almost stopped believing I was worth choosing," she said. Obina's face tightened with pain. "But now," she continued quietly, "I know something." "What?" She gave a small, tired, beautiful smile. "That a person can be poor and still carry honor." Obina took her hand gently. "And a person can be loved, even when others try to bury that love." Amara nodded. He drew a little closer. "Do you still believe in us?" She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "I do. But now I believe with open eyes." Obina smiled through the emotion in his face. "That is enough for me." He lifted her hand and kissed it softly. Then she rested her head against his shoulder. Below them, the house was quiet. Above them, the night was gentle. And for the first time in a long time, peace did not feel like something fragile. It felt earned. Amara entered her new life not merely as a poor girl rescued by wealth, but as a woman whose value remained real even when others tried to bury it. And Obina did not just marry the woman he loved. He survived a battle over love, greed, class, and dark interference, and came out of it knowing that true love must be protected not only from open enemies, but from hidden evil and human pride. Their story left a truth behind that many in the village never forgot. A person can be family and still betray you. A person can be poor and still deserve honor. And a true love may be attacked, delayed, and wounded, but it cannot be stolen forever.